One. Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a great scenario for you that I'm almost assured that you've been in. So just imagine yourself at a networking event or you're at an event where there's somebody that you need to introduce yourself to, and you walk up to them and you introduce yourself to them, and then they introduce themselves to you. And like within 3 or 4 seconds, panic attack happens because you forgot their name. Oh my gosh, when's the last time that happened? So I know that I struggle with it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to find somebody to help me with this. So I'm honored to be hanging out with John Graham. He's the three-time USA memory champ. So my gosh, welcome to our show.
Dave, yeah, I used to be in that scenario too, so I'm happy to help people.
Awesome. That is so cool. I tell you, there's nothing that is like so uncomfortable that I know of from a business perspective, John, where you're kind of all excited to meet somebody. Maybe you know somebody's there you want to meet. Maybe it's somebody fresh that you've never met. And it clicks, but you forget their name. So I want to unpack that today. But first, I want to find out how in the world does somebody become a three-time USA memory champ? I mean, you must be studying like crazy.
To be honest, I didn't know about it either. I read a book, a very
Okay.
popular book called Moonwalking with Einstein. And
Okay.
the book talks about a competition where people memorize like names, numbers, decks of cards, poetry, all this crazy stuff. And you would think it'd be full of like savants or people with photographic memories. And come
Yeah,
to find out, it's just normal people who have learned techniques. It's all a skill, just like riding a
sure.
bike or playing a piano. So I just started practicing the techniques and I went really far, really deep. And yeah, three championships later, here I am.
Wow, that's so cool. 2018, 2022, and 2023. So it's not like these are 25 years ago. These are current deals. So congratulations. So I'm just curious. So like I think about spelling bees and I think about the kind of the work that they have to do. They ask for like the origin of the word and they're kind of sounding it out in their head. They have this kind of this process. I mean, for you, how did you like practice when you talk about practice and deep dive? What is the test? I guess my question is like, what do you have to do to become the champion? Are you like reciting a book, or what is it that you actually have to do to get that championship?
In the US championship, there's an elimination style finish. So
Okay,
all of the finalists will go on stage and memorize a list of numbers in the first event, or sorry, a list of words. And each person will have to say the next word. So, if you miss a word, you're eliminated, right? So you go backstage and you get a list of 300 words in 15 minutes, and you just got to go as far as you can and hope you say the correct word on stage. Um,
wow,
yeah, and then there's a long-term memory event where you have thousands of data bits you have to memorize a month in advance, and they quiz you on it. There's an event called the Tea Party where it's very practical. You're introduced to six different people who
okay,
have different names and birthdays and addresses, occupations, all this stuff. You have to memorize a dozen facts about each person, and then you're quizzed on it on
sure.
stage. People are eliminated. The final event is three people go on stage. They each have a deck of 104 cards, so two decks shuffled together, the same order for each person, and you have 5 minutes to memorize those cards. And then each person says the next card into a microphone, and if you miss a card, you're out. And then the last person standing is the champion.
Oh my gosh. Okay, all I'm doing is like panicking right now thinking about that. That must be so stressful for you. I mean, is this something this is a weird question. Obviously you enjoy it, but man, there's got to be some stress and some panic and
Yeah,
anxiety in there as well, isn't there?
100%. Yeah, that happened in my first competition. I learned these techniques, which involve a lot of imagination. We can talk about that. And
Yeah.
I went to my first competition thinking, oh, I'll do really well, I'll get an award, whatever. And I completely bombed because of the pressure. I mean, my heart was leaping out of my chest. It's such a
Yeah.
psychologically, emotionally, mentally testing process. And you're right,
Yeah.
especially in the US Championship, it's so much pressure. And that's sort of my life story, and we'll talk about it, is overcoming the pressure. Like, how do I perform? I know the techniques, I know what I'm doing, but the pressure is causing me to melt in my mind and my seat and freeze up. And how do I go about navigating that?
Wow. Oh my gosh. So was the 300 words an accurate num? I mean, that's how many words they gave you, and then you're supposed to obviously memorize as many as you can. Is that's like a real deal? How far did you get, just out of curiosity?
I mean, I typically memorize about 130 just to be safe. Like, that's a safe number for me because most people can't, that I'm competing against, can't really go past 100
Okay.
in the US, which is still a great
Wow.
feat, right? But
Oh, no kidding. Five is a great thing.
Mhm,
130. Wow,
mhm,
that's fantastic.
mhm.
And so you obviously um compete with other people, and you said they're tapping out, or they're maxing out somewhere around 100. Is that in that particular skill? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I've developed an ability past probably most of the competition because at that point, at the stage I'm at, you have to get really fast and you have to really trust yourself
Yeah.
because it's a point of speed. You have to, what I'm essentially doing is turning the words into something meaningful, like an image or something I know associated to that word, and then creating a story in a place that I know. So
Okay.
imagine the first two words I'm putting at my front door at my house into a
Okay.
story,
Okay.
right? And then I walk inside, and in the closet are the next two words, right? So if the words are positive and polarity, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
positive, I imagine like a plus sign, right? And a polarity, you can imagine like a pole, like a North
Okay.
Pole, right?
Sure.
So there's a
Okay.
positive, or you can imagine a charge on a pole. It doesn't matter
Sure.
as long
Yeah.
as you associate something and put it at your front door to remember those words. And that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm doing that very fast. And then
Yeah.
I'm reviewing it again to cement it in the same order on the same path through my house.
So just out of curiosity, John, if I said like what was word 84, would you be able to dig and say, oh, that's bowling pin or whatever? I mean, or is this like you have to go in that order and to get to 84?
Well, I could do it. It would take a second just to count and make
Yeah.
sure I put the right order, but absolutely. I could go backwards, I could do it at any point. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And so
Mm.
like you said though before, this wasn't something you don't have a photographic memory. And it wasn't anything. I know, like on your website, it talks about it's not there's a variety. It's you listed a lot of things that it's not. So I'm just curious. How what. So for someone listening, let's try and make this really simple for somebody listening that does struggle remembering. Let's just say two things: a name and a company, because those again would be really helpful for most people to be able to say, hey, if I could leave that event remembering, the name and the company name that they work for, I would be like, this would be a great 40 minutes of our investment. So what encouragement do you have, John, for those people listening that would love to learn that piece?
Yeah, first of all, you don't have a bad memory. That's a belief.
Okay.
Okay. So I had the same belief. I used to suck at names, like all of us kind of do. You know, we have to associate meaning with what we're remembering, right? So if I meet Dave, right, I'm turning Dave into something I already know that I already
Okay.
associate with Dave, right?
Okay.
Maybe you have a friend who's Dave or an Uncle Dave. Instant. Okay. So now I have to associate that Dave to this Dave,
Okay.
right? Maybe they look completely different, but maybe I imagine, wow, my Uncle Dave is growing long hair, right? And make a simple connection, a story to you so that when I see your long hair, I think, oh
Okay.
yeah, my Uncle Dave grew long hair. Or maybe I imagine Dave rhymes with shave, and I imagine you shave your head, right? Because I
Oh, okay.
noticed your hair.
Sure.
So I'm turning meaning into the name and I'm associating it to you and making that sort of connection. So when I see you and I see your long hair, the story should come back.
Wow. And like how long does it sit in there? I mean, like your 130 words can, like, if you look at them and today and you process and get those locked in, how long before you would start to be challenged to remember some of those words?
I could remember them forever if I wanted to, and if I wanted
Okay.
to space out the review.
Okay.
But if I didn't touch it, I would say maybe a week. I would
Okay.
remember most of them and they'd start to fade like
Okay.
anything else. Because it's supposed
Sure.
to. The brain is supposed to process that out. Yeah.
So then for that networking event, so you remember your Uncle Dave. Like for me, I was just thinking about you and I was like, I know a guy named John.
Mhm.
And so then I'm imagining John without hair because John has hair.
Mhm.
So I'm, thinking about that piece. Now I know that I can, make that connection there. But the question really is like, how long does that last? Because if I see you in a month and I didn't practice it or I didn't lock it in or, I
Mhm.
didn't rehearse it, am I still going to remember, oh my gosh, that was, John? And is that going to be pretty easy for me to remember at that point?
It'll take practice.
Okay.
You're way more likely to remember John after doing this practice. But you also, if it's a month out, want to make sure if you're meeting a lot of important people, just take 2 minutes at night and jot down all the names you remember and remember the stories. Oh yeah, John was bald, and make these little connections so that they imprint. Because review is the most important ally you have with
Okay.
memory. This is why people forget is they don't take time to review it or to go over it again.
Gotcha. And how do you do that? Like on those 130 words, you kind of create that story, you start at your front door and then you walk through your house. Excuse me. But then how do you then so you would literally come back and start over and just walk through that house again and say, two pieces here, two pieces in the closet, and then you just walk about throughout your day.
Mentally walk back in my mind's eye. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Wow. So I'm guessing that adding into this is that panic or I'll use anxiety more. I think anxiety is probably more of a user-friendly word for that spot because I'm sitting there talking to you. I get introduced to you for the first time. I try to remember this story and, but then I can feel that anxiety coming because it's like I'm trying to listen to you, but I'm also,
Mhm.
formulating in my head excuse me, where I got that story. I've always seen the brain struggling to do two things at once.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, how do you like compartmentalize that in that situation?
Well, that's typically what people try to do with anxiety is to compartmentalize it or to block it out, right? And that's
Okay.
ultimately if you want to, and I use the word overcome, but if you want to defeat your anxiety, you can't block it out because the anxiety is the medicine, meaning you have to lean into it and merge with it. So we can talk about this, but anxiety and all this mental health and mental performance is actually an emotional root issue that's driving it. The mind is what we jump into and live in to try to survive it and try to figure things out, but that makes it worse. So, if you're trying to overcome the pressure within and the anxieties that you're dealing with, as you're trying to ascend in life or in business, the only way is through. The only way is to merge with it and to relax into it and to allow it to happen, which sounds completely counterintuitive, and it is. But,
Right.
I went through years and years of all the mental performance and the hacks and the mindset and all the meditations and things thinking that was helping when in fact I was avoiding the root issue and making it stronger and louder. Um, so anxiety is a very common thing for many people, but it's an accumulation of suppressed emotions that's causing it to happen and to get louder and louder in these key moments.
Hmm. Are there different words, John, for anxiety? And because some people might not connect with that. Have you just saw in your research what other words kind of work in that place?
Yeah, I mean, I never agreed, or I never liked that word either. Anxiety. I said, I don't have anxiety. I denied it for years.
Right.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
pressure. It's pressure. There's a pressure within, there's a resistance within you, which we all have. There it could be high stress, it could be brain fog, overwhelm, overthinking, all of that kind of melts into just a label of anxiety. It's just a language that we call this experience.
Well, and then I guess that's where I think it really helps to transition this discussion into that, because in the workplace, now all of a sudden pressure, resistance, overwhelm, those are a lot more prevalent. So when we come back from the break, I want to unpack that so that we can kind of, help some of the listeners on that. So we'll be right back. Awesome. I am honored to be hanging out with John Graham, a three-time USA memory champ. So super cool. What a cool designation. I mean, oh my gosh, everybody must revere you. Do you like at family reunions and parties? Does everyone like try to like give you all these words and make you memorize them, or are they past that now?
Yeah, I've had that experience. I every once in a while I like pulling up a deck of cards to someone who doesn't know what I do, and like I ask them to shuffle it, and then I look at it for a couple minutes and then I just recite it back to them. So it is a cool party trick for sure.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, again, to transition into the workplace, because I think this is a really interesting spot to be right now, is, when you talk about pressure and resistance and overwhelm, those words, anxiety, panic, whatever, again, you want to use for a word. Why is it now that it's almost status quo to have some of this? We do a lot of work in EQ and stress, and we have a stress assessment, and it shows you, where different stresses come from and some are worse than others. Obviously, stress in some way is positive because, like, if you have a due date of a project, that's due next Friday, that's stress, but it's not really bad because you have this date. Now, if that's a 2 month long project and you have to fit it into 80 hours between today and next Friday, obviously that's where that stress goes crazy. So I'm just curious, in the research that you've done on this, why is it that we just feel like pressure is status quo, and it's almost like it's kind of worn as a badge of honor sometimes?
Yeah. Especially in the performance world, peak performance, high performers, high achievers sort of use that
Uh,
as a badge of honor. And I understand that. You know, they like to use it, or I used to use it as a badge of honor, but also hid this sort of embarrassing side of it, because the opposite edge of the coin is we procrastinate or we shut down or we talk ourselves out of taking higher action steps when these things occur, but we don't always share it. I mean, I was going through really nasty anxiety, heavy in the chest, waking up with dread, having panic attacks daily, and that's crippling. It's embarrassing. We don't want to show that to people, especially, we want to show
yeah,
people how badass we are.
yeah,
I
yeah,
did too. I'm a
yeah,
memory champion. I'm a grandmaster. I've performed in front of 400 million people. And like,
yeah,
I'm going through this stuff and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't
yeah.
make any sense. We want to defeat it. We want to overcome it, but it affects so many people because we're not handling it the right way. We're treating it as a mental issue and a performance issue when in fact it's much deeper. And now people are starting to talk about it more, as you're noticing, but
Yeah.
people are starting to uncover what's really at the root of this and how to transmute it and not just overcome it, but transmute it into your higher potential. Higher potential meaning if you can alchemize and transmute this root issue, you can actually increase your capacity to handle more life force, more energy, more voltage of life, if you will, more pressure, and perform to the level and potential that you were meant to all along.
So I've never heard the word transmute.
Mm.
So what does that word mean? Because I've never heard that. So I wouldn't even know how to use it in a sentence.
Yeah, transmute is to change it,
Okay.
so Napoleon Hill talked about transmutation of sexual energy in his book Think and Grow Rich. And at the time I didn't know what that meant either, right? What do you
Sure.
mean transmute? He meant turning that sexual energy instead of trying to release it and dump it and, watch all this unhealthy stuff, and all the men know what I'm talking about. It's to transmute it into energy and life force vitality into your purpose,
Hmm.
right? Into action. And so when I'm talking about transmutation, the actual root issue of anxiety or the pressure within is an accumulation of suppressed emotion. We hold this in our organs and our DNA and our cells through tension. Anytime we're poked through life, these emotions come up, right? Anxiety, pressure,
Hmm.
and we try to shove them back down. When I say transmute, if you lean into that sensation, that feeling, not through your mind, but if you relax into that sensation, it will transmute, it will release, process out like it was meant to, and it increases your capacity to handle more. So that's
Hmm.
a transmutation. Is It's sort of an embodiment practice where, and I don't even like the word practice, but it's a way of alchemizing, which is another word for transmutation, transmuting all this dense suppressed energy that we've held our whole lives and converting that into capacity, into potential,
Sure.
into actually reawakening all the parts of us that are dormant and suppressed.
So could you like turn that into like an actual situation in an office so that somebody listening would be
Mhm.
able to understand? Because again, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of overwhelm that's happening right now.
Mhm.
Um, and so, if somebody listening right now, John, is in that spot, again, this transmute sounds like, oh, wow, what you just said is like way over my head. I'm like, how in the world am I going to do that? And I'm like, forget it. I got to go back to work. Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
like, how do you like put legs to that, excuse me, to where it's like somebody's listening right now and they're stressed or they're in panic or whatever word they want to use? What are some simple things that they can do to be able to work through that?
yeah. That's a great question. So if you're in a state of frenetic energy or panic or dread or anxiety, you're in your head, you're disconnected from your body. And so over time, what you want to do is be more in your body, in that uncomfortable energy. And I know you're not going to want to do this. That's why people stay in it, right? Is because they suppress it and they ignore it. So what I want you to do is to relax and release all the tension in your body. You're tight. Relax your forehead, relax your jaws, relax your shoulders, relax your chest, your gut, your butt. I mean, you will feel the tension in your body when this is happening because you're tensing up to hold that energy down. You're trying to control it, and it wants out. It
Yeah.
really does. And so if you release the tension and you start relaxing into that energy, it's uncomfortable. It's highly uncomfortable. That's why we avoid it. But that
Yeah.
energy is your potential. Imagine, right? Imagine all of that uncomfortable energy as your suppressed potential because it really is. It's a part of you you've suppressed and deactivated. So over
Mm.
time, you start relaxing into that more and more and more as it's happening, not later, not, oh, when I have time, like in that
Yeah.
moment,
Sure.
relaxing into that uncomfortable energy. And without trying to figure out how to get rid of it, right? Because the mind will completely get in the way here. This is just a body practice.
Mm.
And people always told me this, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. It's, whatever. But that's how you overcome anxiety and pressure is
Mm.
by letting it wash over you. So
Wow.
you start waking up without the dread and the overwhelm and the anxiety.
So I have a real world example that I want to run by you. So I'm in the middle of getting a bunch of dental work done, and like I dread the dentist. I mean, there's plenty of things that most people I would rather speak in front of, a million people than have to go to the dentist, right? And most people it's the other way around, right? But my question is, so like recently and like in the last couple weeks, I'm sitting in the chair and I feel like, man, they got a jackhammer in their hand, and I feel myself tensing up, right? Like just like, oh my gosh. I'm like just natural, right? Your body just naturally tenses up, like you were saying. And for whatever reason, I started to just notice that I was doing it, and I'm like, just relax. And I went from like really tense to just relaxing, and it really changed the outcome of that. And I'm just curious, is that what you're talking about? Something similar where you're just so physically tight and then you just let it go and it just seems to be a world of difference.
Yeah, because you're actually allowing it to happen, right?
Okay.
Anxiety and overwhelm is you're resisting life, the flow of life, right? So if you release your tension response, you're allowing the voltage to move through you, right? So that's what you were doing. And you didn't like tell yourself an affirmation or a mantra or anything silly. Like, and no, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But
Sure.
you just
Yep.
relax your body, notice when you're tense, allow it to happen. And the more and more you do that, the more capacity you have to handle more of life. Is because you're not constricting. Emotion is just energy. It's
Yeah.
energy motion, right?
Wow.
So this is your energy work. You're allowing the voltage of life to move through you. And some of it's processing out. Some of it's that anxiety, that dread is old stuff that you've had since third grade, or, it doesn't even matter when, but it's
Yeah.
inside it. And so kudos to you for noticing, being conscious and noticing when you're tense.
Yeah.
Because that's what we have to do. We have to notice every single moment we're tense and just, you
Hmm.
know, it's a normal response, but we have to relax into that.
Is it
Allow it.
always a physical thing, John? Is it always like like this? Because I'm thinking about somebody listening that maybe is overwhelmed in their job.
Mhm.
Maybe it's somebody that has to return to the office. They've been working at home for the last few years, and now there's this stress and tension of going back into the office and kind of reacclimating. Is it always show physically, or is there other ways that it might manifest itself?
Well, sure. I mean, physically in the tension, but it mostly drives through the emotion. So when you're overwhelmed, imagine you're full of suppressed emotions. Your whole body's full of these dark, dense energies, and life pokes it. So when you're overwhelmed, it means you're being poked left and right. You're being poked because you look at the calendar and you have a meeting. You're being poked because you don't like your boss. You're being poked because the dog, chewed on your shoe before you like every little thing you got caught off in traffic and you're bothered. Pretty soon you're overwhelmed, meaning there's so much fire burning
Hmm.
inside of you. Now you have all the smoke of mental stuff and you're trying to like put out the smoke when there's a
Yeah,
fire raging inside of you. So there's
sure.
mental, there's emotional, there's physical in an overwhelmed situation, but it's all the root issue is all that emotion, that energy that's just trying to get out. And that tension and that like trying to figure out what's going on and waving the smoke isn't tending to the fire.
Yeah. Wow. Well, because I've in the research that I've done about my brain, it seems like my brain's on my head for one purpose, and it's really to protect me.
Yeah.
So when your brain sees smoke, then it assumes that something bad is happening, and it might not be bad. It might just be different. But I like that you brought emotion in because we do a bunch of work with emotional intelligence. And one of the things that we talk about, like for somebody that is in that spot, it's really helpful. I know personally for me, this was a really great tip for me. I asked the question of like, what's the worst that can happen right now? Like what, like I'm in that dentist chair and I'm like, what is the absolute worst? Are you going to die? Probably not. It's pretty low likelihood that you're going to die. And I kind of start going through this checklist. It's going to be uncomfortable, but in 20 minutes, it's going to be done. And I start reasoning with myself. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, good or bad, healthy or not, but it just kind of really helped me kind of walk through that bad experience that I was having.
Yeah, I used to do that too. A lot of my mental exercises. There's nothing wrong with that for sure. But just understanding that it's an emotional root issue, meaning the mind likes to figure everything out. Our minds are beautiful, you know, but they get in the way so many times because they try to figure everything out and fix things that frankly can't even be fixed or don't need to be fixed. So in that moment, relaxing and just feeling the sensations in your body, being with your body is all you really need to do because the mind, anything you say to convince yourself out of it is sort of a bypass.
Yeah,
Like if you say, "Oh, when I'm 80 years old, this won't matter." That's true, but you're avoiding the energy that's trying to come up. And the more you
sure.
try to talk yourself out of it, you're avoiding this moment where you can release this suppressed energy that's been in you all along. So I like to keep it simple and just be in that uncomfortable energy and being present with it out of the mind as much as possible.
Sure. Wow. Well, and you said something funny like we want or your mind wants to fix things. It seems like that's and sorry for anybody listening that gets offended by this. It seems to be more of a guy thing,
Yeah.
right? Where guys tend to want to fix things, right? Rather than just listen or experience or be. We immediately, I just, envision myself putting on my, imaginary tool belt and it's just loaded with tools and I'm just going to fix whatever is in front of me rather than, allowing it to happen. So, is that normal? Do you know, is that um, your first instinct is to go to try to fix it in your world?
Well, it's understandable because the mind is the masculine part of us. And masculine not necessarily meaning men and women because we all have masculine and feminine energy, but masculine is mind, logic, reason, problem solving, which are all great
Sure.
things, structure.
Yep. Yep.
And feminine is more flow and feeling and intuitive and creative, right? Which is more
Yep.
inside in the body.
Yep.
So that's why men, I mean, culturally, we are masculine or mind dominated culture or country. That's why
Sure.
most of us, even the women, are, trained to like think and organize and structure over more so than to be in tune with themselves. But yes, women naturally are more in tune with their sensations and feelings of what's going on and connecting with that than men.
Wow. Nice job. Thanks for giving us that feedback. That's oh my gosh, this is so cool. As we start to land the plane, I'm just curious, like, let's kind of lock this workplace in. What part does mental health play in the workplace? Because again, I feel like up until recently, it's kind of always been separated. People used to say, leave your emotions in the car, leave your problems at home. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, I don't know how to do that. And I'm just curious, what are you seeing as, mental health in the workplace and how are people approaching it health in a healthy way?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's drawing more interest and more awareness, which is great, right? We each as individuals need to take responsibility for our own mental health and our internal health, I would say emotional health. And now some of you know how to do that more, right? It's something I help people with. But to answer your question, we're all responsible for that. We don't want to go into a situation of a group and spew our conditioning and our trauma onto other people unconsciously because we're all doing that to some level, whether we like it or not. And so we work better as people if I can work through my own stuff, I have much, much greater capacity to handle anyone who's going through anything.
Sure.
When I had anxiety, I couldn't listen to anyone who was stressed out. It bothered me. But now that I've been through this, I have so much capacity to
Gotcha.
be with people no matter what they're going through and not react and not get triggered or not get, drawn in. So if you do your own inner work and alchemy and transmutation, you're impacting other people around you, whether you see it or not. And so I would say individually, we all need to, you know, take that responsibility on. We're responsible for ourselves, but when we change ourselves, we help the group as well.
How does the leader then what is the leader's responsibility? Because I feel like running into less and less, John, but I've run into people that are like, they take no responsibility as a leader. They blame the team. If I had a better team, this wouldn't be an issue. There's this disconnect there. So I'm just curious, what do you feel leaders listening right now, what part do they have to play in this mental health piece in the workplace?
Leaders need to be embodied, meaning they have to do this work where they're accessing greater capacity, where they're regaining all the lost parts of themselves so that they can lead people. Leadership is not through words and commands. It's through someone who is embodied, who already has those traits and qualities and abilities because they have regained access to them, right? So just like if you're a leader or you're a parent, you don't change the culture by telling people what to do or telling your kids what to do. You become the leader, you become the embodied person who then everyone magnetically follows and learns from by example, right? So that's what I work on with leaders is embodiment,
Sure.
is transmuting all of this suppressed potential inside of us so that we have greater capacity and greater abilities that we've laid dormant throughout all these years.
Well, I love that word. I wrote that word down, capacity, because, like you said, when you dealt with your stuff, then you had greater capacity to help others. And I think, man, if we really adopted that as a country or as a culture or as a company or just as an individual, we would be able to help so many other people around us. And so that I love that word. Couple questions, I'm gonna let you go. Tip of the day here. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? John, maybe it's something that we covered already, and maybe it's just something that is burning on your heart that you haven't had a chance to share yet.
Yeah, I always like to share this that to make peace with every single thing that bothers you. So I typically don't give out mental exercises to people, but this is a great one is write down every single thing that bothers you in the next 24 hours, and you'll be astonished. All of those are pointing at something inside of you that you've suppressed. The guy who cuts you off in traffic, or someone makes your food wrong, or, every little thing, every big thing, every email, all of that is indicating something inside of you that wants out and transmuted. And so now it's your job to go through and to release all of that bothers you, to become the embodied leader, to become whole again, right? And to release all the stuff that's in your way.
Wow, make peace. How cool is that? Thank you for sharing that. Which kind of leads us to your website, releasepanic.com. What a cool name for that. So there, you have a bunch of stuff. You also have what's the other website? I didn't write it down for the memory side of you. Is it just your name?
Yeah,
Memory
memoryjohn.com.
John, that's what it
John
is.
with an
Okay.
H. Yeah, you can download a free guide on how to remember names and faces and get into the memory world, which is fascinating. Or releasepanic.com/free. You can learn how to go deeper into this and to release anxiety and the pressure within for good, that resistance that's holding you back, not through the mind, but through the emotional root issue.
And this is a deeper topic than, you might be of thought of as we jumped on this call today for those listening. So rather than doing what you normally do and jump into your next podcast, really sit with this. And this is why, John has, these two websites for you to be able to, do some deeper thought through this. But if somebody listening, John, wants to connect with you, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say email me directly. Um, I have all kinds of opportunities to work with me or to ask questions. So John with an H at memoryjohn.com. Just email me. I'm
Perfect.
also on Instagram at memoryjohng. Feel free to message me. I'm happy to help anyone who's curious because a lot of the stuff I share is completely new to people, which is very understandable. It's completely against
Sure.
the grain and happy
Yeah.
to help anyone that I can overcome or just to transmute, to reach their true potential within.
Wow. Well, if I would have known, I would have had a deck of cards ready and we could have had fun with that because so we'll have to have you on again. I
Next
mean,
time.
that's so impressive and such a cool thing that you have going on. So again, for people listening, email John at John, John at memoryjohn.com or jump on memoryjohn.com or releasepanic.com and at least do a little bit of homework, do a little deeper dive. If this is kind of like, intriguing you, I just challenge you again, rather than jump into your next thing, to really sit with this. He said a lot of deep things. And if pressure and resistance and overwhelm are things that you've had for a long time, and you've tried a bunch of things to try to solve that, it's entirely possible that you might have been working on the wrong end of the problem. So, thank you so much, John, excuse me, for hanging out with us. And man, I got to figure this out. So thank you. I'm going to watch the video, and at least, if nothing else, I got to learn this trick of, not trick in a bad way, but this tip on how to really improve my memory, because I'm stuck there where 3 minutes in, I'm like, crap, what was this guy's name again? Especially if there's like four of them, then I'm like, really, one I can kind of dial into, but man, when there's multiples. So I can't wait to jump on to your website and download that and go through it. So thank you for all you're doing. Congratulations. Are you up for 2024 memory champ again?
I just retired and I went down to commentate on the championship. So I'm in a
What?
new phase of my life and happy to, yeah, work on and mentor people accessing greater potential because we're in a new phase of this. Entering a new chapter, an exciting
Sure.
new chapter in this world, and I'm happy to share and empower people
Cool.
through. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, congratulations. Too bad it's not an Olympic sport. If it
yeah.
is, then I bet you, then you'll jump back in,
I'd
right?
probably
Then
come
you
back.
unretire.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, exactly. That's what I thought. You'd unretire. Well, hey, if you do, let me know. I'd love to be in the front row watching you. So again,
Cool.
thank you for everything.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Dave, so much.